I want to talk to you about navigating a separation in your marriage or relationship. So there are times that you need to separate, and it could be with the intention to get back together, which is the best option if you have that as an option. But if it could be that it's the first step towards getting a divorce. But I really want to focus in this video on having a separation with the intent of reconciling. So it takes prayer and wisdom to make the difficult decision of when and then how to do the separation. But here are some, not all, but some reasons that you may need to separate, healthy reasons. One, you hit an impasse and you've tried everything and you're stuck in really toxic patterns that are destructive to you and your marriage, and it could be your kids too. You're going to divorce, and you can't stand to live together while you're making those steps towards a divorce, and it's safer for you and better for you to be separated, so that you just need to make that physical separation now. You both recognize that you need to work on yourselves and you can't do it together. What happens when we're together is that it's really hard to change behavior and patterns because each of you are doing the same thing that you normally do. You're coming home to the same house, you have the same schedule, you have the same response, you have the same triggers. Being with that person tends to trigger you, and then you're reacting, and then you can't really focus on changing yourself because instead you're mad at your partner, your spouse, and you're upset about what happened, and it's just too messy to make a lot of personal changes sometimes, and you need to separate for a time where you can really focus on healing yourself and getting insight to yourself, and then your spouse can focus on healing and getting insight for himself or herself. If there's child abuse occurring, or there are patterns that are detrimental to the children and you need to protect them, that is a very good reason to separate. The next one is physical violence, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse. You have a right to protect yourself from abuse. You do not have to live with abuse. You often need to force a separation with abuse, and then I'll tell you how to focus on the behavior that you want changed. There's an affair and your spouse refuses to end the affair. There's only a certain amount of time that you should spend together after you discover an affair before you need to give the message that if this continues, the repercussion is that there's going to first be a separation, because there's a physical separation, and then eventually there's going to be a divorce if this continues, because you want the spouse to have to make a choice at some point, whether it's going to continue in your marriage or suffer the consequences of a divorce. There's financial irresponsibility, and you need to protect your assets. When you separate, you get more protection from your assets, and you should see an attorney to make sure that you are protected and what you need to do to protect yourself in whatever state or country you're in. The next time is if you need time to decide if you want to stay in the marriage or relationship, and the only way that you can really figure that out is to get some distance to where you can focus on what you want and get a better, clearer idea about what the problems are. So, like I said, this video is on separation. So here are some of the guidelines. When you are seeking a reconciliation, or you make the decision for a separation, you need to decide, how are we going to do this? We're going to live separately? Who's going to live in the house? How are we going to see the kids or spend time with the kids? How are we going to do it together, or are we going to do it separately? How are we going to handle the money? Are we going to literally split accounts, or are we going to work together and still pay bills the same and work out of the same accounts? Are we going to see a counselor together and or separately see a counselor to work first on our own issues, then before we work on the marital issues. These are all decisions that you make together, hopefully. And the other is, do you need to date? Are you going to spend time dating? Are you going to go out once a week and have a fun date night and not talk about any of the problems? Are you going to meet once a week to discuss problems and maybe spend time working through or sharing some of the insights that you've gotten when in your own process, or being able to talk about things you couldn't talk about before? You have to decide if you're going to continue to have sex, under what circumstances. Definitely need to not do that if your partner is having an affair and you are risking exposing yourself to sexually transmitted diseases. Also, you need to think about how that affects you emotionally and spiritually and relationally, and the message that sends to your spouse, or whether or not that not having sexual relations is part of the consequences or the separation that you need to experience. All these things are decisions. Then when you, the other thing is that you both need to be very clear on what it is that needs to change for you to get back together. So my recommendation is for each of you to write a list of the minimal changes, minimal, not how you're going to be, person's going to be your dream person, minimal changes that have to occur behaviorally, meaning you could check them off on a list because you can observe them. You can count how many times they happen. What are the least minimal behavioral changes that your spouse has to make and your spouse expects you to make, and you're very clear and you can be honest with each other. This is the expectations I have, that you'll change this and you'll change this, or you'll work on that and you'll work on this. Now, you may not be that clear yet. At some point you need to have this for yourself and for your spouse if possible. Sometimes sharing this with your spouse gives you the spouse the opportunity to look at it and go, no way, not happening, not making those changes. Then you know, okay, I've got to make a different decision because these are my minimal changes. This is what I truly in my heart know that I have to have. And if I can't, this marriage is unhealthy for me and I can't get back into it, then you have to let your spouse know this is a no deal then. It's a deal breaker if you say no to these things. So then you would need to proceed to a divorce. So it's really good to have the clarity about what you need to have changed so that you can see if it's changing, and so that you know what direction that you're going and that your spouse knows. You also can look at the list that your spouse gives you and decide if it's a no-go or not, and let them know, can I do this, or am I not willing to do this? Then the next one is, when to reunite. When you've had time apart and you recognize there's change in the relationship, change or movement has happened in each of you, that you've learned new things, you've changed some difficult behavior that needed to change, you've gotten the perspective and the distance that you need in order to heal, to see things clearly. If you've made progress in dealing with the issues that were causing the problems, maybe somebody's had time in a recovery program from an addiction or has gone through a program of identifying abusive behaviors, you're starting to see a change, or you have seen a change for a certain amount of time. I cannot give you a certain amount of time. Everybody's situation is different. You just want to see change. You want to see movement. You want to see the person acknowledge the problems, take responsibility for the change, and begin to show you that there is truly change. That when you point out that there's something that, like a return to the old behavior, the person has a soft heart and is willing to say, I'm sorry, I slipped. I'll continue to work on that. So you know that is change. So if you can see that the separation is beginning to cause too much distance between you, because there is a point in a separation, there's always a risk in a separation that both of you or one of you will find out, hey, I'm happier alone, or I can make it alone. I don't have to stay in this marriage. Often we stay in the marriage based out of fear, and a fear of loss and a fear of being alone. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I like this. This feels really good. This is peaceful. This is comfortable. I'm happier. So if you're in your separation and you recognize, hey, we're starting to feel too separate and we want to get back together, then that would be time. And then also, separation is expensive. If you are unable to continue to afford to live separately, and for your financial future, you have to get back together, make sure that you have a plan to address behavior that has to change, and that is a safe move. There's always family, or usually family, that somebody can live with, or a friend for a while. Make sure it's safe. If your partner, husband, wife, spouse doesn't want to reunite, is just moved out, is done, refuses to, then you can't force them. You need to make sure that you're protected and make sure that you have your assets protected, and that person isn't going to, you don't want to let somebody be gone for, like some people do, for a long time, and then the person is hiding all the assets and spending all the assets, and then you end up with nothing. So you want to make sure that you have legal guidance if you can, and you have an agreement with your spouse to go to a mediator or somebody who works together, a collaborative attorney. Saves you a lot of money and a lot of heartache. Do that. Try to do that. There are some really good ones out there. But if the person is dead set on not getting back together, then at some point you've got to decide, do I need to protect myself with a legal separation, or do I need to file divorce? Sometimes people are refused to file for divorce. They're say, I don't want it. I'm not going to take that responsibility. I'm not going to be the one. Fine. Make sure you're protected. That's all. Make sure that you are taken care of. When your spouse wants to separate and you don't, you can't control that. If the person is dead set on leaving and needs that time, person is free to go do what they need to do. You want to make the most of your separation if you can, by working on yourself and taking care of yourself and making sure you get support, and divorce recovery if you're going to go through a divorce, or if you're in a separation and looks like it might be divorce recovery is a really good support group, and you can look it up online, and divorce care is what it's called. It's at churches, and it's a great support group, and you can get a counselor. And again, like I said, make sure that you are protected legally. So I know that it's difficult to go through this, but it can be a positive thing that can actually strengthen and resolve some long-term marriage problems where you need to have that separation in order to come back together. So I hope this is helpful. And there's a lot of resources online, and my classes for women in difficult marriages are really good if you're in a separation or a difficult marriage, or even going through a divorce. And also my Transforming Difficult Relationships for men who are going through divorce, very helpful. I do them online. I have a lot of other resources. My 365 daily devotions for Christians in difficult relationships gives you a lot of tools also that you can use. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it will be a really helpful, productive tool where you can print this out. There's a tab on the bottom of my website. I'll put the link in here where you can actually print it out so that you can use it, sit down, talk to your spouse about it, and make a plan. So, okay, I hope this works for good in your life and in your marriage. God bless you.